So not only are we going to see folks on Pod Save America or whatnot try and conflate Medicare buy-ins with the Medicare for All bill that Bernie Sanders is promoting. And again, not that I think that's a bad thing, because after we get the Medicare buy-in, as long as we still have this goal, it's going to make it easier to get there. We're also going to see folks try and steal some of Bernie Sanders' thunder, even if they are wildly and extremely remotely, related to Bernie Sanders, right? I mean, this is like when, Bernie Sanders right now has the popularity, the energy. There's also a lot of reason to believe that a guy who's 80 years old may not be running for president in 2020, which is why there were 16 people standing next to him co-sponsoring the bill who you wouldn't have thought necessarily 6 months ago would have co-sponsored a Medicare for All bill. Well, it's not just Democrats who want to get part of that Bernie energy. It's even folks like Rand Paul.
I don't get it. Why you guys want to give money to the middleman? In fact, I said the last time, I'm more with Bernie on this than I am with the members of my party who want to subsidize it. You want to buy people health care, buy them health care. Don't give money to the intermediary. Public money. Why would you give public money to a private company? We had no business doing that, and you're not fixing the problem. I promise you they'll be back for more. It is always that way. If you don't fix the problem, if fundamentally the individual market is unsound, the insurance companies will be back for more of your money.
Okay. What's interesting here, there's a whole lot of lies packed into this, and a little bit of a kernel of truth. What he's talking about, and this is from the HELP Committee, the Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Committee, as they are trying to shore up the Affordable Care Act. And one of the problems the individual market is suffering now in these exchanges is that the insurance companies can't calculate what their payouts are going to be because and what subsidies are going to be available for them because there has been so much uncertainty. And there was a provision called the risk corridors, which basically said to insurance companies, look, you're going to, particularly in the first 2 or 3, 4 years, be subject to perhaps wild, extreme losses and perhaps some profits. Probably losses because you can't predict what your liability is going to be in insuring these groups of people. And so there was basically like, if your losses rise over a certain point, we will backstop that. We will cover that for you. And I suspect that's what they're debating there. But the broad concept that Rand Paul is talking about, first of all, the idea that public money doesn't go to private companies is almost an insane belief to hold. As Rand Paul gets up and walks out of the Senate where he's saying those words, that committee hearing, he will undoubtedly walk by someone who is contracted by the federal government to clean the halls, a private company. Now, so just that concept is just wrong. The idea that we don't, Medicare itself pays private businesses. So this is just wrong. He is being disingenuous here because he doesn't want the government to pay for people's health care, although he's on to something. It would be far, far more efficient for the government not to cut out the middleman. That's in fact the argument. Rand Paul has mistakenly, let's remember that when he was, I think, debating with Al Franken back, I don't know, when the debate as to repeal and replace was going on, Rand Paul said, like, what we should be doing is we should be increasing risk pools, because when you make a risk pool larger, you actually make the insurance more affordable. And so we should allow people to create as big a risk pool as possible. We should expand it over states. And then Frankenstein said, I think you're on to something. We should maybe actually make like we could actually make an entire country a risk pool. And that, of course, is what we call Medicare for all. So Rand Paul, once again, tries to sort of walk this line between sort of a theoretical position that he holds without quite crossing the threshold into advocating what Bernie Sanders does.
He's actually good at that, though, right? Like, he seems to do this quite a bit.
I'll tell you how you become really good at that. You put yourself in a position where nothing you say will ever materialize. And so then you can say anything and walk these very highly theoretical lines and never have any data directly to refute everything you're saying. And that's what he does. And so he can do that. It is, as Kem Champion has just reminded us, his core brand proposition. I mean, remember we heard this in the context of the debt ceiling fight, right? Like, this is why this guy can afford to vote against the rising of the debt ceiling. The same reason why we heard people, right-wing talkers saying, well, the reason why Ted Cruz voted against Sandy relief was because that was his principle. And he could vote against it and exercise his principle because he knew the relief would actually get distributed, which is an incredible misunderstanding of the word principle, I think. But that's what we have. Hi, folks. Sam Cedar here. We still need your help on our Patreon page. YouTube ads have come back, but not nearly as much as we had before. So if you can help us out, any little bit helps. Head over to our Patreon page right at this URL, and you'll help us keep helping you by making videos